Get the whānau together, stay in a batch, crack open the chili bin and slap on your jandals.
That's that New Zealand. That's Zealand speak.
That's Zealand speak. Thanks, Dave. How's that aged? That was 2009.
Was it 2009?
2009.
Oh, far out.
John Key with Dave Letterman. Should the politicians just stay away from comedy?
I mean, I don't know actually, because I actually think that some inadvertent comedic moments have happened that actually do still make me laugh. You know, I do like Sir John Key very much, but I do still have a giggle when I see the three-way handshake.
Is it, you know, do people criticise this and say she should be focusing on matters closer to home rather than traipsing around on these? This was the criticism of Key back at the time.
She's in New York. She's been given a fantastic opportunity. It's a great opportunity for New Zealand. She is a guest of substance.
Yep.
I think she should grab it with both hands.
Well, and the difference will be she's been interviewed, right, rather than having to do the stand-up gig. So, yeah. And presumably if she puts a few more bums on Air New Zealand seats, if some people see her and some whiz kid in Silicon Valley and wants to migrate down here, this is the
she is an ambassador for New Zealand, and she's an extraordinary one, so I think she should absolutely do it.
Well, plus she's also a role model for women everywhere about that you can do this.
That's
you can
true.
lead a country.
But can you go to space? That's the really
or do you want to go to space?
That's the really clunky segue that I'm trying to move to. Outer space. Elon Musk, who needs no introduction, announced his company SpaceX would send the Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa to the moon in 2023. Maezawa has said that he has bought all the seats on the flight because he wants to take 6 or 8 other artists with him. He's a well-known art lover, and so this is his thing. He wants artists in space. I've just suddenly thought of Pigs in Space, the old Muppets thing. Artists in space. What do we make of that? Who would you go?
Fabulous.
Cool.
Who would you take? Who would you take? Singers, art painters, sculptors?
Take all of them.
Yeah, someone from all different disciplines. Because it is Suffrage Day today, I did a bit of research, and actually there has been an astronaut who has painted in space. So it is possible.
Really?
And she was a woman, Nicole Stott. So
on the International Space Station?
Another first.
Yeah, look at us go.
Yeah. Painting in space, cool. And would you, if you were be chosen, if you were the guy doing this, what grounds would you use to choose people? What would you be looking for?
Well, innovation, obviously. You want to be working with people who are able to adapt to different environments and who will really thrive with the challenge of being completely removed from the ordinary.
Mm. Yeah, and I think taking artists is a fabulous idea that art allows you to kind of suspend time, a different interpretation and a different perspective on your world from somewhere like the moon. We've seen fantastic things come out of the Antarctic residencies of writers.
I thought of that today too, right?
Poets.
It's a similar, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah?
But not for me.
Not for you? You're not going to pitch?
No.
Lizzie, you're a singer?
No, not for me, But I do quickly want to just say to anyone who doesn't know, Mere Te Tai Manga Kahia Aka Nehi Tomoana Niwa I Te Rangi, go check them out. They're true suffrage heroes.
They sure are. Sorry we didn't get to your panel says today, but we will be back tomorrow with more panellists and more korero here on RMZ. It is coming up towards the 5 o'clock news, and after that, Alex Perrottet is in with Checkpoint. Have a great evening.
Kia te whakaronga mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet. Thanks for joining us. On tonight's program, thousands of people around the country gather to celebrate 125 years since women won the right to vote. The government hikes refugee quota from 1,000 to 1,500, but it won't happen until July 2020. Don Brash calls for Massey University to look at whether Vice-Chancellor Jan Thomas should resign over what he describes as a misleading explanation for cancelling his campus speech. I'm at home with mother and full-time carer Diane Moody as she prepares to take her handicapped son to court in a bid to seek better pay from the Ministry of Health, and a urgent review into Wellington's bus service, all coming up on Checkpoint after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The leader of the National Party is calling for Massey University's Vice-Chancellor to go, saying she tried to thwart free speech. Jan Thomas cancelled a campus speech by Don Brash last month, citing security concerns. Emails since obtained under the Official Information Act show that a month before the planned event, she said she did not want the university to be seen to be endorsing racist behaviour. Simon Bridges says it appears security was not the reason for the cancellation.
I think Jan Thomas has to go. I mean, she has been dishonest, and more than that, she has tried to thwart free speech. And that's just not good enough anywhere in New Zealand, but certainly not on university campuses.
Simon Bridges. Massey is defending its reasons for cancelling the speech, saying concern about a security threat was genuine. Labour and New Zealand First are reunited over the refugee quota, which the government announced today will be raised from 1,000 to 1,500 in July 2020. The commitment was called into question last month when the New Zealand First leader, Winston Peters, said New Zealand needed to look after its own people first. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
Mr Peters says he has no reservations whatsoever about today's announcement. He says immigration is trending down and the government is already looking after New Zealanders. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says all the governing parties are proud to be making a huge difference in the lives of refugees. But the opposition isn't buying the picture of unity. It says Mr Peters must have secured a secret deal in exchange for his support. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
Parliament has marked Suffrage Day on the 125th anniversary of women getting the vote. Jacinda Ardern put a motion to the House this afternoon.
I move that this House mark the 125th anniversary of New Zealand women becoming the first in the world to win the right to vote and celebrate the contribution of women to New Zealand's democracy, past, present and future.
Jacinda Ardern acknowledged Kate Shepherd, Margaret Severite and the 25,000 other women who signed the suffrage petition in 1893. In the debate that followed, the National MPs Amy Adams and Nikki Kay recalled being mistaken for men's secretaries when they were cabinet ministers. Government ministers have rejected the Speaker's request to bring Clare Curran's personal emails to question time in the House today. The Senior Minister Grant Robertson described emails between the former minister and the tech entrepreneur Derrick Handley, but did not table the exchanges as requested. Ms Curran lost the government digital services portfolio after failing to record a meeting with Mr Handley, who was applying for the position of Chief Technology Officer. On his way into the House, Mr Robertson said he did not intend to release all the emails.
They're being dealt with via the normal Public Records and Official Information Act processes. What I am doing in the House today is giving an answer to the question that provides dates and details about the content of the emails.
Grant Robertson gave details of 3 exchanges last month about various aspects of Mr Handley's application. North Korea has agreed to allow international inspectors to observe what it says will be the permanent dismantlement of its key nuclear missile facilities. Its President Kim Jong-un and his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in have hailed a new future for the two Koreas after signing a wide-ranging agreement in Pyongyang. The ABC's Jake Sturmer reports.
Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in have signed the Pyongyang Declaration, and their defence chiefs have vowed to reduce tensions and prevent accidental clashes on the peninsula. President Moon says the North may take additional steps, such as closing its main nuclear complex, subject to the United States taking reciprocal measures. Kim Jong-un says the Korean peninsula will now be turned into a land of peace and prosperity that will be free of nuclear threats.
Jake Sturmer with that report. Wellington's controversial new bus network is to be independently and urgently reviewed. The Regional Council has voted for the review after being bombarded for 2 months by passengers complaining about changed routes and erratic service. The Council's Chief Executive, Greg Campbell, says he takes full responsibility for fixing the network's problems. He says the review needs to be done quickly.
Any commuter that is left stranded or a bus is late is of extreme concern. We have to get a clear view on what is happening. An independent review, what it can really do, and particularly for management and council, is just give a view of what happened, articulate that well.
Greg Campbell. The results of the review will be reported back to the Council in December. It's 5:05. Sport. 4 Warriors players, including the NRL's leading try scorer this season, winger David Fusitu'a, have been named in the Tongan squad to play Australia in Auckland next month. Fusitu'a is joined by clubmates Solomono Kata, Ignatius Pasi and Levaha Pulu. It'll be the first time the two nations have played each other. The Silver Ferns play Australia for the first time under new coach Nolene Taurua this weekend, but the Diamonds are the furthest thing from Taurua's mind. She chalked up her first win as coach of the national side when the Ferns comfortably beat South Africa in Tauranga last night. It was a much improved performance on their biggest ever loss to England at the weekend. However, Taurua says they still need to focus on their own game before they can start dissecting Australia's.
We've come a long way within a short time, and we've got to celebrate these small improvements. We will turn our attention, I suppose, to Australia towards the end of the week, but at this stage it's just about getting ourselves better.
Nolene Taurua. Liverpool and Barcelona have both enjoyed wins in their opening Champions League football matches, but Tottenham have begun with a loss. Liverpool beat Paris Saint-Germain 3-2 at Anfield. Lionel Messi scored a record 8th Champions League hat-trick in Barcelona's 4-0 defeat of Dutch side PSV Eindhoven, and Inter Milan notched 2 late goals to beat Spurs 2-1. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, Simon Morris reviews the latest from Tinseltown. Our Drama Hour celebrates 125 years of female suffrage in Aotearoa, and Thomas Monkton talks about his caterpillar circus for children. All before we metamorphosise into
Sashay Away, the Amazing Race, which I swear to God has honestly been winning best reality show competition
forever.
Let's put a whole bunch of people together and watch their relationships break down as we torture them as they race around the world.
That's lately with Karen Hay on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Scattered rain about Coromandel and Bay of Plenty today. Areas of cloud and the odd shower elsewhere. Fine spells tomorrow and isolated showers, some heavy about eastern Waikato, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Gisborne and the Wairoa district, periods of rain easing tomorrow. For the remainder of Hawke's Bay, also the Tararua district, cloudy with scattered drizzle, but fine spells developing tomorrow afternoon. Taranaki to Wellington and Wairarapa, including Taihape, mainly fine, cloudy areas tomorrow evening. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but a few spots of rain in Southland and Otago from tomorrow afternoon. Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine today, but showers about Fiordland spreading elsewhere tomorrow and turning to rain south of Hokitika. And for the Chatham Islands, low cloud and occasional drizzle. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you, Katrina. Great to join you. Alex Perrottet here hosting Checkpoint for the next month or so. Lots on the program tonight. Suffrage Day celebrations, Don Brash and Massey University, Australia's strawberry scandal and Clare Curran's emails to would-be Chief Technology Officer Derrick Handley. All of that coming up. But let's begin with the refugee quota. The government is going to hike the quota from 1,000 to 1,500, but not until July 2020. The announcement finally clears up the confusion over the government's plans after New Zealand First recently threw a spanner in the works. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
Jacinda Ardern and Winston Peters, side by side and back on the same page over refugees.
We're both very, very proud. All of us are proud with the announcement that we've made today. It will make a huge difference to the lives of refugees.
Labour campaigned on a promise to lift the refugee quota to 1,500, but Mr Peters cast doubt on that several weeks back when he was in Nauru. He said then it was not a government commitment. New Zealand had to first look after its own people, such as its 50,000 homeless and people in places like Hokianga who needed help. Today, a very different tone.
This is about people, not about politics and controversy.
Mr Peters says he has no reservations whatsoever about lifting the refugee quota. He says immigration is trending down and the government is already looking after New Zealanders.
This was always on the cards, that we'd get it done when we had all the background work done on the refugee centres. Also the housing preparation and a host of other things.
Winston Peters is holding them to ransom.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges doesn't buy the unified picture. He says there has to have been a quid pro quo.
We'll see the size of the secret deal in due course, whether it is big changes in the industrial law area or whether it's $1 billion for one of his pet projects. You can be sure he's got something for this deal.
That is not how this government works.
Jacinda Ardern wants to project a picture-perfect government, everyone in line. But there was a notable absence.
Where were the Greens? They're more of a camouflage party than the Green Party.
No one from the Green Party was at the announcement. They want the quota to go much higher, up to 6,000 over 5 years. This comes nowhere close. But the Green MP Golriz Gurraman is putting on a brave face.
This is just a beginning as far as I'm concerned, yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we do need the Green Party policy in order to bring us in somewhere between Australia and Canada per capita, so we're still lagging behind.
The increase also won't kick in until July 2020, still nearly 2 years away. Ms Ardern says the timeline is simply a logistical matter.
If we welcome people into New Zealand, we need to make sure that we can provide them with adequate housing, adequate services, and that they're in communities where their neighbours are provided with that adequate housing and services too. And we're doing both.
Decisions have yet to be made about what regions the refugees will come from. Cabinet will consider that at a later date. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
It's 11 minutes past 5. Massey University's Deputy Pro-Vice-Chancellor says he's disappointed his university manipulated the truth about why it banned Don Brash from its campus. Chris Gallivan says university staff have expressed worry, if not distrust and even anger, at Vice-Chancellor Jan Thomas after she cited security concerns as a reason for cancelling Mr Brash, or Dr Brash's scheduled speech last month. Documents, including emails obtained under the Official Information Act, now show that Dr Thomas and the university were concerned about its reputation as well as Don Brash's views. Our reporter Amy Williams reports.
About a month before Vice-Chancellor Jan Thomas pulled the plug on Don Brash's speaking event, she said in emails that she did not want a Tia Tiriti-led university to be seen to be endorsing racist behaviours. And she wrote she could only imagine why he had been invited because of his controversial views on Māori. A senior Massey academic says he's incredibly disappointed the Vice-Chancellor misled the public over the cancellation of Don Brash's speaking event on campus. Deputy Pro-Vice-Chancellor Chris Gallivan says the university's council have the power to decide if Miss Thomas should lose her position.
Whether she should resign really revolves around that question as to whether she still has the trust and confidence of all the staff. Massey University Students Association have just issued a press release saying they have no confidence in the Vice-Chancellor, and so that's what the students' body, one of the students' bodies, has said, and it remains to be seen what the staff say.
Massey University Manawatu Politics Society spokesperson Michael Curtis says he's shocked and feels misled at what appears to be a coordinated plan to shut the event down.
At the very least, I'd like an apology from the Vice-Chancellor. I mean, this definitely shows that there was, at least at the very basic level, some sort of conspiracy to shut down Don Brash right from the get-go. It wasn't something that happened in the week leading up. This was planned and coordinated long before the event even happened.
Mr Curtis says the club's executive team still wants to host an event on campus with Dr Brash because free speech should be protected at universities.
It is obviously our intention to try and bring him back to campus if we can, but obviously that will be dependent on whether the Vice-Chancellor and the rest of the Massey will allow it to happen. We have received an email since then from the Vice-Chancellor saying that if he were to come back, she wouldn't try and stop that. But obviously with Official Information Act requests and all information that's provided from last night onward, that does cast that in a bit of doubt.
Massey University is defending its reasons for cancelling Don Brash's speech, saying concern about the security threat was genuine. However, Don Brash says he's surprised by the emails and believes the Vice-Chancellor misled people over the reason for cancelling the event.
Quite frankly, I don't know that the Vice-Chancellor can stay in her position. She has been shown to be totally misleading, if not downright dishonest. It's almost untenable for her to remain as Vice-Chancellor of the university.
National Party leader Simon Bridges says Jan Thomas has to go because she tried to thwart free speech.
Universities for centuries have been the bastions of free speech, of people being able to say controversial things. It's outrageous what's happened here with Jan Thomas, and we don't want to see a trend here.
New Zealand legislation guarantees academic freedom, but does not take a position on free speech. Universities New Zealand represents the country's 8 universities, and its executive director, Chris Whelan, says it's important for tertiary institutions to contribute to public debate. He says universities take a range of positions on free speech.
They're always having to juggle a range of factors, which include everything from, is it hate speech? Is it genuinely likes to hurt individuals? Are there issues of academic freedom? Are there issues of free speech generally? And are there issues of health and safety in terms of activities going on campus?
The Massey University Students' Association says it has no confidence in the Vice-Chancellor. Professor Thomas could not be reached today, and the university declined RNZ's requests for interviews. For Checkpoint, this is Amy Williams.
And we will hear more from Don Brash after 6 p.m. tonight. It's 5:15. Mother and full-time carer Diane Moody is taking her handicapped son to court. In her latest bid to seek better pay from the Ministry of Health, 51-year-old Shane Chamberlain, who has the mental age of a toddler, requires care around the clock. His mother Diane has provided that care and also fought to be paid more than the minimum wage for just 21 hours a week. Diane has told this program in the past and again today that she works almost 10 times that amount a week. She says she was ecstatic back in February when the Court of Appeal ordered the Health Ministry to reassess her case. The ministry came back and offered 37 hours a week, but Diane wants 40 and is fighting not just for herself but for all the other carers that also struggle with the paperwork and the bureaucracy. The Court of Appeal back in February heavily criticised the assessment process, but Diane says nothing has changed since then. Now Diane has turned to a different court, the Employment Court, to argue that Shane is just not capable of being an employer. She says it's the Ministry of Health that should be her boss. The Ministry of Health has used that very point to decline our requests for comment this evening, saying the matter is now before the courts. Now, we did something a little bit different tonight. I've just started at Checkpoint, so I've had recent job interview experience, and I went along to Diane's and Shane's home today to submit my application. I'm here for my job interview. I'm a bit nervous, to tell you the truth. I've got my CV and I must say I've done a bit of volunteer work in the past, but this might be a little bit more. Hello.
Hi.
Alex is my name.
Hello, Diane.
Pleased to meet you, Diane.
You're here for the job interview.
I'm here for the job interview, yes.
Well, do come
the right
in.
place?
Welcome, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, come in.
All right.
Please sit down, have a seat.
I'll sit here. I can be sort of grilled by the panel. I imagine the boss is going to turn up at some stage.
Yes, really, Shane is the boss, of course, of all this. I am the employee at this stage.
Walk me through a bit of my standard day. When do I start?
Well, this morning, the first toilet started at 4:54, because, the clock's beside the bed, so I know. So it could start at 2 o'clock in the morning if Shane's had a bad night, or he's got bad reflux, or he goes to the toilet, or who knows. So, you could really, any hour of the day or night.
So there could be any start and finish times?
Absolutely, yes. But of course, if he's up at 2 o'clock in the morning, that could be for the whole day, may not go back to bed. So, as long as you don't need a lot of sleep, you'll be right.
Okay, so they're the work hours. What about any time off? I mean, is it your tough boss?
Well, he's really a lovely guy, as you'll see when you meet him. Time off, well, no, there's not really any time off. The only time off I get is 4 hours a week if I have to go and do shopping or I've got appointments, and Shane then just goes down to the local rest home because there's nowhere else for him to go. So other than that, no, you're on duty.
Right. So with all of this, you've told me about some conditions, some pretty extreme work hours. I imagine the pay's pretty good then.
Oh, the pay's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. That's minimum wage, but you only get paid for 17 hours a week. That's all you're going to get paid. You're not going to get paid 40 hours a week or 160 hours, what it involves, 24/7. 17 hours at minimum wage. So that's pretty good job so far, eh?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You just do everything. I mean, you know, I have to shower Shane and dress Shane and shave Shane and
take him to the toilet.
Take him to the toilet and wipe his bottom and make sure that he suffers really badly with sinus. You've got to make sure that you clean his nose out every morning. And
I think I'm going to have to meet him.
well, yes, I'll go and get him, shall I? He's in there actually just playing with the marbles at the moment, because that's another thing, of course. You know, if he loses one of his marbles under his bed, then you're responsible for finding that particular marble. Could take you a while, but you'll find it. And you have to make sure that, you know, we have Rapunzel on a tape that plays over and over and over. So you're going to make sure that Rapunzel's always on hand. But I'll go and get Shane.
Okay, maybe we should go and see
Well,
him in his room.
Yes, come and meet him. Come and meet Shane in his room with his elephants in his mouth. Shane?
Hello, Shane. My name's Alex. Pleased to meet you.
This is Shane. Look at me. Alex wants to ask you some questions about employing her. Hey, listen. Do you think I'm doing a good job looking after you?
What if I replaced your mum and you were my boss?
A bastard.
Are you the boss?
I think he just called you a bastard.
We haven't got off to a great start.
It would be so simple, because the ministry just need to be the employer. After all, they pay me my whole 17 hours. So they need to be the employer.
What's your message to them?
Just, you know, do the right thing. Do the right thing. I mean, I said to the David, the Minister of Health, I'm quite happy for him to come and meet Shane. I don't know, you know, perhaps he thinks he is a good employer. But, and that's why, of course, we're going to the employment relations, you know, going to court there. Pretty bad when you've got to take your handicapped son to the court, isn't it? But what else can you do? If you can't get through to them, you've just got to keep on and on and on. It's not a job that people would line up for.
No, it's a vocation. It's a calling.
It is a calling,
but it
yes.
needs to be paid.
Well, yes, I think it really does, doesn't it? You know, but of course it's just not Shane and I. I mean, you know, it's all of us who, you know, want our people to live at home and have a good life and that's where we're at, aren't we, Shane?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy being a boss?
No.
You don't?
But will you be my boss?
No.
No?
No?
You're happy with your current employee?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a hard case, Shane, aren't you?
Diane Moody there with her son Shane Chamberlain, an extraordinary woman doing extraordinary work on Suffrage Day as well. And at 5:23 on that point, today marks 125 years since women won the right to vote, and thousands of people around the country got together to celebrate the anniversary. Men and women, young and old, gathered to remember the women who have come before and those to come as well. Last night, the founder of domestic violence support group The Aunties cleaned up at the Women of Influence Awards. Jackie Clark was named Supreme Winner, as well as winner of the community and not-for-profit category. Jackie is one of those people who sees a need and does something about it. She's worked for 6 years with victims of domestic violence, not those in refuges, but she finds them one by one, and she organised all sorts of support with her social media skills. While her stock in trade is the kindness to others, there are some things that she is actually quite hardline about. There's plenty of work, of course, with police investigating a case of domestic violence every 5 minutes in this country. 3/4, though, of all the domestic violence cases are not even reported to police. And that, I guess, is why Jackie Clark told me her day starts well before the crack of dawn.
A typical day is I wake up around 4:35 o'clock, and my day starts with replying to emails and messages that I haven't gotten to the previous night. It often is texts from women that I work with closely who may need something. There may be messages from women through the Facebook page who need support in some way or other, emotional support. And that sort of continues throughout the day. I settle down in the office for an hour or so and get admin stuff done. So make sure the social media is okay and that I've got all the requests out on the Facebook page I need to get out. And if there's something that I know will fly better on Twitter, that I've written something for that. And there's all the other, boring stuff like receipt reconciliation, which drives me crackers, but has to be done because I spend a lot of money. That's the reality. I spend a lot of money on these women, so I've got to sort of reconcile receipts. And then I've normally got appointments. So it might be that I'm going to the storage unit to meet with a woman, or it might be that I'm meeting with a social worker. I sometimes am going to court with people to support them. That doesn't happen very often, but I am sometimes doing home visits with women. My days are very random and really dependent on the women themselves and who contacts me. Tuesday, I always have a date with the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective, and I go and see my friends at the Sally Army Transitional Housing Team every second Tuesday. And apart from I have professional supervision once a month, but apart from that, it's kind of usually talking with them on the phone, messaging with them, going on home visits. The storage unit's a big one. If I need to go and get, I might need to go and get petrol vouchers for people. I might need to, go to the supermarket and buy some food for going to lunch with women, because I always put the meetings around lunch.
That's great. You want to take them out and have a bit of a date and make them feel more dignified and better about themselves, rather than just meeting in a particular shelter or something like that.
Yeah. Oh no, I don't work. Just so we're very, very clear about this, I do not work with any refugees. So I was doing that for the first 4.5 years. I stopped doing that last year because the person who ran the refuge I worked with primarily left. I still work with her and her other, she's a social worker somewhere else now. So I don't work with any refugees, just so people are very, very clear about that.
Okay. It's a fairly punishing schedule, though, and I guess that another important aspect of your task is that you are an enabler to get other people to give. You are putting requests out there for things. It might be a mattress, it might be a room, it might be clothes for school children. Tell us, what makes a good giver? What do you like to receive and what do you not like to receive? And how do you feel about how people respond with their generosity to your requests?
How much time do you have? So I am really, really hardline about this, and I've been criticised for it, and I just don't care. Because what ends up happening if you do not specify, number one, exactly what you want, and number two, in exactly what condition you want it, and be really, really clear about that and very hardline on it, is that you get given stuff you just can't use, and I've only got a small storage space to play with.
Jackie, I was going to ask you, you support a lot of people. Some will be thinking, what sort of support do you get? What sort of support do you need personally? And how do you make a living? How do you get by?
Okay. So 2 years ago I quit teaching. We sold our house. We moved to Manadewa. And I'm going to be very honest here. We sold our house at Mount Eden for a crazy, crazy price. Crazy price. Not deliberately. It just happened to be that market at that time. That was what happened. And so we were enabled to leave enough money out for us to live on for a couple of years without me being paid. So we've kind of done that for the last couple of years. In May this year, the Aunties Board decided that they would pay me $24,000 a year, and that the way that we would do that is we would ask people to subscribe to an Aunties charity bank account that was the People's account. So people subscribe to that account with APs, monthly or weekly, whatever. There's different amounts. Some of the women that give and put money in that account are the women that I work with. So whether it's $5 a month or it's $100 a month, it really makes a difference. It's just the number of people who've decided to do that is overwhelming. It's just wonderful. So yeah, I get that, and I get another $800 a month on top of that, which is not taxable for car-related expenses. So my job is I'm self-employed, we decided, well, the board decided I wouldn't deal well with the rules around being employed. So I'm self-employed, you know, and so I'm paid tax on the money and stuff. And so what we're looking for, you know, I'm doing lots of networking and searching at options around how to get back to a, you know, to the level of a proper salary, I guess, and to remunerate me properly for what I'm doing. But that they're even doing that is just, to me, astounding. I mean, it's just astounding. But yeah, I mean, I can't survive on what we got from the House was wonderful, but I don't want to, you know, you don't want to go through your savings.
No, but it proves that they value what they're getting from you, Jackie, and you do a remarkable job. You've received this award. You have a little bit of a platform now, which is great. So, what's your message to New Zealand?
I've got two messages for New Zealand. The first one is give with love. Don't give somebody something just because you don't want it anymore. Give it to them because you've asked them if they need it. Don't ever give without asking. And, yeah, you give with love, and that means thoughtfulness and care. The second message is family violence, domestic violence is much, much more complex. It goes across all strata of society, and it's simply people being really awful to each other. That's it.
What an amazing woman. Jackie Clark, Women of Influence double winner and supreme winner last night. There's lots more coming up on Checkpoint this evening. There'll be more on today's suffrage celebrations from around the country. We will have Winston Peters on the increase to our refugee quota just announced today. Grant Robertson lays out details of emails between Clare Curran and tech entrepreneur Derrick Handley. And we also ask, who is Derrick Handley? We'd also love your feedback, so do get in touch. 2101 is the text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, as well. If you do like using email, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. First, of course, Katrina Batten with the news headlines.
The leader of the National Party wants Massey University's Vice-Chancellor to go, saying she tried to thwart free speech. Jan Thomas cancelled a campus speech by Don Brash last month, citing security concerns. Emails since obtained showed that a month before the planned event, she said she did not want the university to be seen to be endorsing racist behaviour. Simon Bridges says it appears security was not the reason for the cancellation. Meanwhile, the National Party is also demanding to know what New Zealand First got from the Labour Party as a price of its agreement to lift the refugee quota announced this afternoon. 2 weeks ago, Winston Peters said his party had not agreed to lifting the quota. But today, the Prime Minister, with Winston Peters standing alongside her, announced the quota would be raised from 1,000 to 1,500 in 2020. Simon Bridges says Mr Peters must have wrangled something out of his coalition partner for this. Wellington's controversial new bus network is to be independently and urgently reviewed. The Wellington Regional Council has voted for the review after being bombarded for 2 months by passengers complaining about changed routes and erratic service. North Korea is to allow international inspectors to observe what it says will be the permanent dismantlement of its key nuclear missile facilities. Its President Kim Jong-un and his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in have hailed a new future for the two Koreas after signing a wide-ranging agreement in Pyongyang. Mr Moon says they want the Korean peninsula turned into a land of peace without nuclear weapons and nuclear threats. The Prime Minister says New Zealand still has a lot of work to do on issues of gender pay gap and domestic violence. The government has today marked Suffrage Day with the introduction of legislation making it easier for employees to make a pay equity claim. Jacinda Ardern has told Parliament the country needs to keep improving the female representation it has in Parliament. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much, Katrina. We're moving on quickly to the business news with Nona Peltier. How are you?
I'm very well. I was at the Influence Awards ceremony. Yes, it was awesome. It was really great to be there with all those amazing women.
They did well, and some of them were, in fact, even Jackie was quite vocal, wasn't she?
Oh, she sure was.
We've got to move on. It appears Frontera is down, but Sinlay is up.
Synlait is definitely doing very well. They nearly doubled their profit. Very strong increase in infant formula sales. That's helped them. They basically provide product to other companies. A2 Milk is one of their biggest, of course. That's the biggest company of New Zealand. And as it goes, so does Synlait, so to speak, I guess. And they made a profit of $74.6 million. That's almost twice the $39.5 million they made last year. They also are going to be buying a cheese factory, the assets of a company called Talbot Forest Cheese. They're hoping to complete that sale over the next year. And that will give them a new product line. But, you know, it will cost them to do some things that they're planning to do with the development of consumer brands, not just here in New Zealand, but Australia, also the United States and China. And so it's going to cost them more, and they're not going to have such strong growth next year. And as a result of that, the share price fell today 6.5%. That's 84 cents down to $11.94. Now, it's pretty toppy anyhow, but it's still a big step down.
And we've been talking a lot about business confidence. There's been lots of doom and gloom. It seems there's some consistency with consumer confidence. It's at what is it, not an all-time low, but it's at a six-year low.
That's pretty low. And look, that's a little bit more concerning than business confidence going down, because consumers are, you know, everybody. But business is a subset. So if business are saying, well, I don't like government regulation and I don't like taxes and my confidence is down, well, that's, you know, fair enough. But when consumers say, look, I'm closing my pocketbook and I'm not going to be spending any cash because, you know, I'm feeling kind of downbeat, and I mean quite downbeat. We fell there to a six-year low of 103.5. 111 is the neutral. So we're like under the trough, so it's not very good. That's a concern for business, because if people aren't spending, and most of the issues are really in the Auckland region. We had a bit of, we talked to one of the senior economists who put together this survey, Michael Gordon, and this is what he had to say.
You know, households may well be, you know, reacting to what they see and read about, about weak business confidence itself. There's certainly quite a gloomy tone to some of the commentary that we've seen recently, although there's probably a little bit of reason to suspect that business confidence overstates the case. There has been a clear slowdown in the pace of growth compared to a couple of years ago. So we're certainly off the peaks. Things aren't progressing quite as rapidly as they used to be.
And that's, Michael Gordon. So anyways, our top 50 index, it rose nearly 1/3%. The market is taking all the trade in stride. It's up 29 points, sitting at 9,345. The dollar is steady, 66 US cents, 91 Australian and 50.2 pence.
Hey, thank you so much, and thanks for being efficient. We have the Deputy Prime Minister waiting on the line, so I guess we better get to him.
Let's not make him wait.
No. Hey, thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier there with the Business Roundup on this Wednesday afternoon. It's coming up to, well, it's approaching 22 minutes to 6. Labor campaigned on lifting the refugee quota to 1,500, but just 2 weeks ago, Winston Peters cast doubt on that promise, saying it wasn't a government commitment. But today, the coalition partners were singing from the same song sheet when they announced that the quota would indeed rise by that number by July 2020. So does this mark a change of heart for New Zealand First? Its leader, Winston Peters, joins me now. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well. I guess you win some, you lose some.
Now look, just to get the précis for the introduction right. I did not pour doubt on anything. I was in Nauru, and one of your colleagues, in an inimitable and typical way, made a claim that the government's policy was 1,500 refugees, and I said no, it's not. Then they continued to dispute that and made out that I was going rogue on a policy that the government had agreed upon, which wasn't true. The reality was that Labour Party had campaigned to increase refugee numbers, so had the Green Party, and on the 7th of March this year at Victoria University, I set out that we were for an increase in refugee numbers and that we could easily afford it if we dealt with other things first. And that was the page we all three were on. So in correcting one of your colleagues, the rest of you, not you personally, but some of them turned into refish and tried to show there was a difference of opinion. This is not a loss for New Zealand First, quite the contrary. It is a measure of our commitment and our seriousness of concern when people are living in degraded refugee circumstances.
Yeah, and at the time, though, Mr. Peters, you said, and I'll quote it, I'm reading it right off the screen, you said at the time when you were pressed on this, we've got 50,000 people who are homeless back home, and I can show you parts of the Hokianga and elsewhere, parts of Northland with people living in degradation. We have to fix their lives up as well before we start taking on new obligations of the level that some people would like. What sort of obligation would you like as the leader of New Zealand First?
Hang on a minute. I'm giving you a précis or your introduction right. The policy is not before July 2020. It's between July 2020 and the next year, 2021. And what we're going to do is, as I said at the time, we're going to ensure that the number of net immigration is dramatically down, and it's already starting to come down now. The second thing is we're going to get our housing program nationwide seriously going. And the third thing is we have to get Mangere, refugee settlement utility, up to scratch before we can even take this number. All those things were in my mind, and they're in the mind of the other parties as well, in terms of the timeline of introduction. So it's not a loss, it's a win for everybody.
Let's look at the substantive issue, Mr. Peters. We're talking about increasing from 750 to 1,500, and that is in a couple of years' time. So when you do compare to other countries and the refugee intake, are we really doing enough? If the Green Party wants 6,000, can we get upwards closer to that amount? Would you like to see us get closer to that amount?
Well, we are already taking in huge numbers of economic refugees as we speak. And the OECD pointed that out to us, that we were taking net, and of those numbers, a serious number of economic refugees, we were taking over 72,000 net, was the figure that this government inherited. And we have said we are going to have to properly focus on that policy and deal with refugees through the United Nations in a proper way. And we are.
But would you like to go as far as the Greens and say that those economic refugees, as they're called, should be capped or even lowered, and we'd like to see more genuine refugees? Maybe that's a bit harsh to use the word genuine, but it really is Green Party policy to boost up those refugees that seem to be in more dire straits.
Look, I'd love to speak for the Green Party, but I'm not authorised. You'll have to speak to James Shaw or someone else. Now, please don't get me on the program to talk about other parties' policy. I'm talking about the coalition government's statement today, which is supported by the Green Party.
You seem to hint as well that there's a lot of work to be done before we can take on these extra numbers. Are we going to get there in time?
I believe so, yes, because we've quantified the amount of expenditure that's required. I mean, you just haven't got Mangere to fix up. You've got some regional centres to fix up as well. And then we've got to, as I say, process them through the United Nations. And at the same time, get our housing program going nationwide, from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South Island, and start dealing to some of the inherited problems of neglect we received. Now, I might add to that at the same time, look, the refugee figures didn't move for 30 years. And I am pleased to say, if you would ask me, now totally separate, I don't want you to rush off and make a headline out of this, could we do more? If we get on top of the problems as this reformist, well-being government is going to get on top of them, yes, we can do more, but not right now.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Deputy Prime Minister and leader of Coalition Government Partner New Zealand First, Winston Peters, at 18 minutes to 6. And government ministers have defied a pointed request from Parliament Speaker to bring emails from former Minister Clare Curran to question time today. However, Senior Minister Grant Robertson did lay out details of emails between Ms Curran and the tech entrepreneur Derrick Handley in response to questions from National's Nick Smith. Ms Curran, of course, was stripped of the government digital services role after it was revealed she used personal emails and didn't properly record a meeting with Mr Handley, who was applying for the position of Chief Technology Officer. He was paid out $100,000 after the government retracted his job offer. Those communications have become the focus of ongoing scrutiny by the opposition. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
In the House yesterday, the Speaker Trevor Mallard made it clear he'd like to see the emails held by Archives New Zealand brought to Parliament by State Services Minister Chris Hipkins. The Speaker has no authority to order a minister or MP to bring any document to the House except when a minister quotes from an official document. Today, Grant Robertson was subbing in for Mr Hipkins, whose partner's just had a baby. On his way into question time, Mr Robertson was asked whether he'd be bringing the emails to the House.
No, I'm not.
Why not?
because they're being dealt with via the normal Public Records and Official Information Act processes. What I am doing in the House today is giving an answer to the question that provides dates and details about the content of the email.
Once in the House, Mr Robertson gave the details of 3 interactions between Clare Curran and Derrick Handley via her personal email.
The first, on the 11th of August, where Derrick Handley emails Clare Curran about the CTO position and questions about the role of the CTO, including resourcing for the role and potential conflicts of interest. On the 14th of August, Clare Curran replies to that email confirming a call to discuss these matters.
Grant Robertson then described 2 further exchanges, one on the 19th of August where they discussed logistics of the job, including the contents of any public statements, contract discussions with Internal Affairs and the management of conflicts of interest. The third exchange was 2 days later when Ms Curran emailed details about the work plan to Mr Handley, which he acknowledged. National MP Nick Smith asked whether the emails in their entirety would be released.
Given his responsibilities as the Minister of Open Government and this government's commitment to be the most open and transparent ever.
Mr Speaker, I believe I have explained the dates and the contents of the emails today. As I said at the end of my primary answer, those emails will be released in accordance with the rules of the OAA.
Dr Smith pressed on.
Was there any inappropriate content in any of those emails between Mr Handley and Clare Curran over the appointment that influenced the government's decision to not proceed with Mr Handley's appointment?
Mr Speaker, the government's decision not to proceed with the appointment does not relate to those emails.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was also asked further questions about a text and email she received from Derrick Handley about the position, which she says to the best of her recollection she did not respond to. Mr Handley has repeatedly refused to speak about the matter, referring RNZ to a statement on his LinkedIn page. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
At 14 minutes to 6, who is, in fact, Derrick Handley? What's his skill set? What experience does he have? The best person to ask is obviously the man himself, but Mr Handley is not responding to requests for comment. The government also won't discuss his appointment, and we're as yet unable to find any New Zealand tech leaders who will speak about him on the record. So we asked our reporter Zach Fleming to look at Derrick Handley's achievements.
Fantastic. Please welcome the first member of our panel, Mr Derrick Handley, Chair and co-founder of Snack Media, recently founding CEO at the B Team. Before Snack, he co-founded pioneering mobile media company, the Hyper Factory, Sky board member, astronaut in waiting and Virgin voted godfather. Welcome, Derrick.
We unfortunately aren't having Derrick Handley on a panel tonight because he's not answering his phone.
Hi, it's Derrick here. Sorry I missed your call. Please either send me a text or leave me a message. Thanks.
Record your message after the tone.
And Checkpoint called several CEOs of major New Zealand tech companies today. None were prepared to talk on the record about Derrick Handley. So we were forced to find out for ourselves why he was the best candidate for New Zealand's first Chief Technology Officer. That audible CV you heard just before was from the 2014 AGM of Snack Media, a company Mr Handley founded and was chairman of. More on that coming up, but let's start linearly. The 40-year-old's first company, Fever Pitch, an online betting business, went under in 2 years. In its final days, it reportedly lost nearly $3 million in 6 months. He then started mobile marketing company The Hyper Factory with his brother Jeff in 2001. Here's Derrick describing Hyper Factory in 2007.
The Hyper Factory, we're a global mobile media ideas and execution company. So we work with the best brands and agencies around the world and help them bring their brands to life on mobile.
3 years later, in 2010, Hyper Factory was sold to US-based Meredith Corp for an undisclosed sum, reportedly at least $10 million, and it was then swallowed up by its new parent, so it's not known how well it did after that. But around that time, Derrick Handley made several top 100 lists, and aged 31, was named as 2009 EY New Zealand Young Entrepreneur of the Year. And now back to Snack Media. He founded it in 2011. It's another mobile marketing company, and in 2013 it went public, raising $6.5 million from investors. 5 years on, it now has a market capitalisation of just $813,000. Here is an investor speaking to Mr Handley at Snack's 2014 AGM.
As an investor, I like to invest in companies that where I see the directors putting their own money in. You've got a lot of shares, but you've sold quite a lot too.
Mr Handley acknowledged he'd sold some shares, but denied he was selling out of Snack and added,
"It's not anything to do with a lack of confidence in the business, and it's not anything to do with a lack of confidence in Mark. Otherwise I'd be exiting entirely and getting out of here and wouldn't be in this seat."
Just over a year later, late 2015, he did get out of that seat. He resigned as chairman. Snack, after Fever Pitch, is the second company founded by Derrick Handley to lose money after going public. Rewinding a little now, in 2012, Derrick Handley helped start the B Team. He'd bought a ticket for a Virgin Galactic spaceflight and got a meeting with Virgin's founder Richard Branson as a result.
I'm Richard Branson, and I believe that business has the power to make the world better. But it needs a plan B, one that considers people, the planet, and profit.
The B Team promotes business sustainability, and Derrick Handley frequently describes himself as a co-founder. He's told numerous journalists in interviews that the idea was mutually created between him and Branson. But a 6-year-old, now deleted profile of Mr Handley on the B Team website says Mr Handley was brought on board after he simply offered Mr Branson a year of his time for free to work on any idea that Mr Branson needed help turning into a reality.
So I got together with my friend Jochen Seitz and some inspirational leaders from around the world, and we created the B Team.
That promotional video lists the names of the leaders who created the B Team, and Derrick Handley's name isn't included. It's not known why his profile has been deleted from the B Team's website. His latest project is a venture capitalist firm named Era, which, similar to the B Team, invests in companies that have social and financial goals. He told Impact Alpha he wanted Era to invest in 15 companies by mid-2018. Era VC's website lists 5 investments. The most recent speech Derrick Handley gave was at Tech Week in Auckland in May this year. He spoke for 19 minutes and spent the last 5 minutes talking about our government, generally at first, and then this one specifically.
After 20 years of successive governments who have barely even paid lip service to embracing, enabling and aspiring to be a digitally led nation, and a digitally led economy and a digitally led society, then last year it appears perhaps that all has changed, because both of our major political parties had committed to creating the country's first position of a chief technology officer.
He concludes his speech talking about why he believes the CTO position, which he met Clare Curran about 10 weeks earlier and was ultimately offered 3 months later, is important, and what he would do with it.
It seems to me, at least, that there is a very real possibility of a New Zealand enlightenment ahead, where we can bend the world in our direction if we choose to allow our humanity and not just technology to guide us. Thank you.
Whereas the new Digital Services Minister, Megan Woods, isn't even sure if she wants a Chief Technology Officer. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
At almost 7 minutes to 6, we go back to the strawberry story and start with a bit of advice for you. Keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. That comes from one of the country's food safety bosses. MPI's Director of Food Regulation, Paul Danstead, is calling on consumers to report their concerns about food tampering here, after strawberries, bananas and apples fell victim to industrial sabotage across the ditch. Pins and sewing needles were found in punnets across the country, prompting government ministers to call it food terrorism and growers to dump their berries by the truckload. A $100,000 reward is being offered in Queensland, and Australian strawberries being exported overseas now have to pass through a metal detector. I asked Paul Danstead what's to stop similar sabotage happening here in New Zealand.
What we're talking about here is a criminal threat. So the police are the lead on that. That's their area of expertise, but we work really closely with them to make sure our consumers are protected.
Are you worried?
No, we're not worried. We do get threats from time to time from criminal elements in New Zealand. We're well practiced dealing with the police, etc., and our big retailers are able to pull product off the market in very short notice. And what we do is that we and the police will chase down and find these criminals, and they are severely punished.
Yeah, well, just today, the Australian Prime Minister has announced tougher new penalties over there. I think they've gone from 10 years to 15 years for the maximum sentence for, I think the crime is food tampering. The reason why I ask you if you're worried is because this started in one state and it spread and it doesn't seem to be connected. There are copycat offenders at play here. How much would it take for someone in New Zealand to do the same thing?
So we've been lucky in New Zealand. We have had threats of contamination. We have not had genuine incidents. No one has ever actually contaminated food that is going to the consumer. But we take those threats really seriously. And you'll be aware of the 1080 threat of a few years ago. So that guy went to jail for 8.5 years.
That was the tampering, or I think it was just the threat of tampering with baby formula. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So a few years ago, there was a guy who threatened to put 1080 in infant formula, and he did send some contaminated samples through. So that was a massive operation led by the police, but MPI was actively involved in that. And that it never actually eventuated. The infant formula was never actually contaminated, but that guy was found, and he was sent to prison for 8.5 years.
Okay, what sort of precautions do you take with this as it affects food? And it could take any type. I mean, in Australia, there's pins, there's needles, there was some sort of metal implement found in a banana. What steps are you taking just to ensure that you're ready in case it does happen here?
So all the operators, all the people selling food to the consumer have legal obligations to make sure what they're selling to the consumer is safe, obviously. They are very aware of these kind of threats. They do have systems in place to deal with it, and they can get food off the market very, very quickly, within minutes.
What's your advice to the consumer as we're looking across the ditch and getting a little bit concerned? We don't have any strawberries yet. We're waiting for our own ones to hit the shelves. Of course, we've closed up the gates to Australian strawberries. What's your message to the consumer?
So we'd take threats like this very seriously. Even though it's never happened here, we would take it seriously, we would hunt it down, and we would make sure that that food being sold to the consumer was safe. Look, if consumers have concerns, keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. Do talk to your retailer if you're concerned, or if you're not getting satisfaction there. Call us on our 0800 number.
Paul Danstead from MPI at 4 minutes to 6. There's to be an urgent independent review of Wellington's bus service after the new network has been plagued by all sorts of problems. Since the new network was launched in July, customers have complained about buses being late, too full to board, or not even showing up at all. Laura Dooney has more.
For the first 90 minutes of today's Sustainable Transport Committee meeting, councillors heard from residents still unhappy with the new routes.
The school buses are overcrowded and often late. With the new number 782 route, many Scots College pupils are now not even arriving at school before school starts. Their parents have given up and are now driving them to college.
If you live in Roseneath, Hataitai, you would go to Kilburnie and Rongotai to do things. Now we're expected to change buses at Hataitai and have a 1 to 30 minute wait to go the last 4 minutes of our journey. It's 1.6 kilometres.
Last night I took a number 21 from Courtney Place and I asked the driver would she please radio comms, which she did, so that comms could then ask the number 22 coming up from the station to wait for me at Vic. It didn't. That's happened a number of times. That supposed connection between the 21 and the 22 at Vic doesn't work.
What is going wrong here? There's something fundamentally wrong.
The number 14 bus in particular has been a problem, and councillors have today voted to ask the Chief Executive to have the route start where it used to, in the suburb of Kilburnie. During the meeting, Chief Executive Greg Campbell gave an assurance he'd take full responsibility for the bus shambles and would see it reviewed over the next couple of months. He says his only focus now is getting the network running smoothly.
My focus is entirely right now on getting this network to work well as it possibly can. So it's purely operational. I'm very conscious there are many other things to do, and people have views on this, that and the other thing and want to have things changed that better suit them, and I get that as well. But right now, it is about getting this network to work in the best possible way.
He says the independent review will be delivered by December, as requested by councillors.
Any commuter who is waiting for a bus that has not arrived on time will think it is unreasonable to wait until December. I will do it as quickly as I possibly can.
While councillors voted unanimously for the review to go ahead, Councillor Ian McKinnon raised concerns about the price of independent contractors.
I'm one of these people who always has a little bit of difficulty about employing consultants all the time, but possibly there is a case here to bring in somebody to take an objective view. Let's do it. If we're going to do it, let's do it and get it done.
Mr McKinnon says the public's trust in the Regional Council has been damaged, and to restore it, the Council needs to front up. He says attempts are being made to do that. The Council also voted to ask the Chief Executive to look at changing some routes and adding bus services to others, and to let the Council know of any timetable changes that are needed so people won't have to wait more than 5 minutes for a connecting bus. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, call Laura Dooney, tēnei.
Police have just got in touch about a serious crash. This is on State Highway 2 near Kaitoke, that's in Upper Hutt. Emergency services are attending. At least one person is critically injured. The road is closed in both directions, so do try to avoid the area if possible because there will be lengthy delays. More to come after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten, tēnei. A senior Massey academic says he's incredibly disappointed the university's Vice-Chancellor misled the public over the cancellation of a Don Brash speech on campus last month. When Jan Thomas cancelled the speech, she said she was doing so for security reasons. Emails since obtained under the Official Information Act show that a month before the planned event, she said she did not want the university to be seen to be endorsing racist behaviour. Chris Gallivan, who's Massey's Deputy Pro-Vice-Chancellor, says it's up to the University's Council to decide if Ms Thomas should lose her job.
Whether she should resign really revolves around that question as to whether she still has the trust and confidence of all the staff. Massey University Students Association have just issued a press release saying they have no confidence in the Vice-Chancellor. And so that's what the students' body, one of the students' bodies has said, and it remains to be seen what the staff say.
Chris Gallivan of Massey University. The High Court has quashed a government decision on alleged steel dumping by China. It's asked the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment to take another look at the issue. Emma Hatton reports.
In July last year, the ministry found that imports of galvanised steel coil were undercutting the local market, but that the products were not being subsidised by the Chinese government. The local manufacturer, NZ Steel, disputed the decision. It said the description of government should have encompassed banks and other entities, which might have proven the Chinese steel industry was being subsidised. It also said the Chinese government didn't provide enough information and that New Zealand officials had discounted similar overseas findings. The High Court has found in favour of New Zealand Steel on both points. This is Emma Hatton.
Meanwhile, the parent company of New Zealand's largest steel mills, BlueScope, says industrial action by its workers isn't helping to reach a pay settlement. More than 350 Pacific Steel and New Zealand Steel workers in Auckland went on strike today. The Air2 union says BlueScope isn't sharing this year's profit of $1.6 billion with its workers. But the corporation's New Zealand Chief Executive, Greta Stevens, says its pay offer is above inflation.
We're disappointed by the strike action. It hurts both our employees and the business, and it doesn't contribute to the positive dialogue that we need to reach agreement.
Greta Stevens of BlueScope. The lawyer for Dame Jenny Shipley and 3 other directors of the failed construction firm Mainzeal says no one can say the firm's collapse would have been less disastrous if it had happened earlier. The company, which collapsed in 2013, owing creditors $117 million, is being sued for $75 million. Jack Hodder says it's speculative to assume the directors knew or should have known that Mainzeal's future was untenable long before it went into liquidation.
Hindsight is one of those things that everybody can kind of reasonably quickly say, of course we agree you can't use hindsight, then moves on and then applies hindsight. So our proposition is that it's an easy and dangerous mistake to think that what makes sense with hindsight was predictable as events unfolded.
Jack Hodder told the High Court in Auckland the directors were intelligent, thoughtful and conscientious people who took their responsibilities seriously. The Australian government has announced a new law and tougher penalties to help combat the country's fruit tampering crisis. Needles have been found inserted into strawberries in 6 states, and the police are investigating more than 100 reports. The ABC's Henry Bello has the details.
The Morrison government will increase the maximum jail time for those found guilty of hiding needles in strawberries from 10 to 15 years. Those who recklessly contaminate fruit or make false statements about doing so on social media will face similar penalties. Scott Morrison says the federal government will take strong action against those found guilty.
You're scaring children, and you're a coward and you're a grub.
The Prime Minister is urging Australians to continue buying strawberries.
Henry Bellow reporting. The Mayor of Christchurch says she'd be happy for the City Council to help with the purchase of the former home of Suffrage leader Kate Shepherd. The Ilam House, valued at more than $3 million, is up for sale, and the Prime Minister says the government is in negotiations with the owner. At the launch of a women's endowment fund at the House today, Leanne Dalzell said she'd like the council to help in some way.
I think it might be a little bit out of the price range for the council, but obviously it's not something that we've specifically discussed as a council, but it is something that's quite an important part of our history. But it's not just the history of the city, it's the history of the nation.
Leanne Dalzell says the building could become a national centre of significance. Aurora Energy says power has been restored to more than 4,700 Wakatupu Basin customers whose supply was cut during Monday's heavy snowfall. Crews are trying to reconnect 11 customers in the Glenorchy area, but Aurora can't say yet when that will happen. It is 6:05. Sport, two-time winner and world number 10 John Isner will return to compete in next year's ASB Tennis Classic in Auckland. The American, who hit a career-best world ranking of 8th earlier this year, won his first ATP Masters title by beating 3 top 10 players en route to victory in Miami. He also reached the Wimbledon semi-finals and the US Open quarterfinals. Drug-Free Sport New Zealand has joined an international chorus demanding the postponement of any decision to allow the Russians' readmittance to international sport. National anti-doping bodies around the world don't want the World Anti-Doping Agency to reinstate the Russian agency until it proves it's fully compliant. Here's sports editor Stephen Hewson.
The Russian drug agency was suspended 3 years ago after the McLaren report revealed it ran a state-backed systematic doping program. The report eventually led to Russian athletes being unable to compete internationally, including at the Rio Olympics 2 years ago. The chief executive of Drug-Free Sport New Zealand, Nick Patterson, says access to the lab data is crucial as it will allow anti-doping rule violations to be pursued. Patterson wants WADA to postpone its decision, which is due to be made tomorrow, until after Russia has released data from the Moscow lab. This is Stephen Hewson.
A Wellington Phoenix bid to sign veteran Nigerian striker Obafemi Martins to a marquee A-League contract has failed. The former Inter Milan and Newcastle United star wasn't tempted by the offer while he continues to recover from a long-term leg injury at his Chinese club. That's the news.
The fight continues for women.
And I was just wondering what Kate Shepherd would have said if she'd been there. And I think what she might have said was 125 years and you haven't got equal pay yet.
The drive for fairness.
We need to negotiate a collective agreement with Userbus, and that is the fault of the company that we have the shambolic fiasco that we have at the moment.
A time for change.
It could be done really creatively. You could have it as an outcrop of Te Papa, you could bring back the petition here.
Driving the news during the week from 6 to 9 on Morning Report. Then on 9 to noon, the challenges the Billion Trees program has created for native plant nurseries. And after 10, best-selling author of Big Little Lies, Leanne Moriarty, on her new book, 9 Perfect Strangers. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Scattered rain about Coromandel and Bay of Plenty today, areas of cloud and the odd shower elsewhere. Fine spells tomorrow and isolated showers, some heavy about eastern Waikato, Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Gisborne and the Wairoa district, periods of rain easing tomorrow. For the remainder of Hawke's Bay, also the Tararua district. Cloudy with scattered drizzle, but fine spells developing tomorrow afternoon. Taranaki to Wellington and Wairarapa, including Taihape, mainly fine, cloudy areas tomorrow evening. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine but a few spots of rain in Southland and Otago from tomorrow afternoon. Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine today, but showers about Fiordland spreading elsewhere tomorrow, then turning to rain south of Hukatika. And for the Chatham Islands, low cloud and occasional drizzle. It's almost 9 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Another fantastic woman doing a fantastic job on Women's Suffrage Day.
Oh, thank you so much.
Have we given you an award yet?
No. I don't deserve one.
I think you deserve one.
No.
I think you deserve at least a long service award.
Yeah, that's true.
It is 125 years since women won the right to vote, and it's something we're incredibly proud of as it set off, obviously, a worldwide trend. Thousands of people today around the country got together to celebrate the anniversary. Men and women, young and old, gathered to remember the women who have come before and those to come. Our reporter Te Aniwa Huri Hanganui filed this report.
Annie Crummer got a crowd of 400 dancing after dawn broke in Auckland's Aotea Square, kicking off a day of celebrations for the 125th anniversary since women won the right to vote. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told the crowd she credits the women who came before her for laying a path for her and others to follow. Nearly 32,000 people signed 13 suffrage petitions that were presented to Parliament in August 1893, among them Ms Ardern's great-great-grandmother Catherine.
The stories of some of our relatives, the women before us, may appear unremarkable, but within the ordinary sits the extraordinary. Women who just got on with it, but had a story to inspire as they went. Catherine, Kate Shepherd, Elizabeth Mabel, Whetu Tirakatini Sullivan, Helen Clark, they're all part of a journey to equality that we're continuing to this day.
Janet Wilson says it's a momentous occasion.
We've come along with my two children to see our third female Prime Minister on this anniversary of Suffrage Day, and it just feels really momentous. So suffrage has just been all my life. I've had the right to vote, and my children will always have the right to vote. And to see it all come together in this neat little package was really, really powerful.
But today's celebrations were also a time for people like Sharon Davies to reflect on what still needs to happen to achieve true equality.
It is about equality, but taking that into a wider context as a woman with a disability. I have a slightly different slant on that, and so fighting for rights as a woman and then as a woman with a disability is slightly harder. Been doing it for many decades, and while I think it's getting better, it's always good to be on the front foot, so to speak.
The Electoral Act, signed into law on the 19th of September 1893, gave women over the age of 21 the right to vote in parliamentary elections. The campaign for the vote was spearheaded by Kate Shepherd, whose 270-metre-long main petition, with more than 25,000 signatures, was unrolled to dramatic effect across the chamber of the House. New Zealand was the first country in the world to enact such legislation, and Christina Sayers-Wickstead believes this country will continue to lead the world.
Suffrage is about universal suffrage. Yes, it includes women's suffrage, but it's about every single man, woman and child on this planet having the right to be who they are and to have a voice. That's what it means to me. And it also means New Zealand.
Do you think we still have a way to go?
Yes, we have a way to go, but this is the place that it will happen from for the whole world. This is the place it happened from for a reason. There is spiritual mana wahine in this land, and this is the place where it will happen again for the rest of the world.
In New Plymouth, about 50 people gathered at a service at the interim Taranaki Cathedral Church of St Mary to commemorate the suffrage struggles of local women. A member of the New Zealand Council of Women, Mary Perrott, and her friend Heather Payton-Lewis dressed in period costume for the occasion. Ms Perrott explains why.
Because it is 125 years and we want to recognise that the women of 1893 were well dressed, and we thought it would be a lot of fun and interesting exercise to get into some of these long skirts and decorate some hats.
Kate Shepherd is a personal hero of Miss Payton-Lewis's.
And for us, Kate Shepherd is still very much our heroine. Yeah, she stands for an awful lot, and we want to bring her to the forefront for today's women as well. She's still on our $10 note. And she did some wonderful things.
And in Wellington, many of those celebrating remembered a suffrage movement that was no easy victory. Māori women who fought for the right to vote faced other forms of oppression too. Those who joined the Temperance Union were prohibited from wearing tamoko, and Māori women were unable to vote in an anonymous ballot. On the forecourt of Parliament, Māori artists from the theatre company Mau joined with Wellington's Cook Island community. Writer Susanna Leataua says they want to remember the many wahine who helped pave the way for equality too.
What we've recognised is that the 125 years sits inside the context of our women in leadership in Aotearoa, Te Moananui a Kiwa, within the context of millennia. So we're coming to acknowledge that day, our involvement as Māori and Pacific women at that time in 1893 and in the years that lead up to that. We're also acknowledging all the women that signed the Treaty of Waitangi and recognising that the 125 years sits inside the context of all of those years of leadership.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was speaking for many when she said the journey to equality continues and the challenges that have not yet been overcome are on the top of her to-do list. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko te aniwa, hurihanga nui ahau.
Kia ora, te aniwa. And there was someone quoted in that package and they said, that's a neat little package, and that's exactly what we would call that. If you want to listen back, I encourage you to watch it back. Go and look at Facebook or our website. There's a lot of beautiful photos and video there to look at that. A lot of work went into that, and a great way to celebrate Women's Suffrage Day. Go and have a look. 6:15. Court sittings throughout the country were put on hold for 2 hours today after workers from the Ministry of Justice walked off the job, demanding better pay. About 1,500 workers joined today's strike action, and they say they'll continue working to rule and taking other industrial action for the next month. The union, the PSA, says workers want a pay rise of 3% this year and a similar amount next year. But the ministry says they're asking for more than 13%. Anne-Marie May reports.
The Justice Ministry lists amongst its values respect and integrity, but placards carried by the workers suggest they're not seeing much evidence of that in the workplace. They say the ministry is the third lowest of all government departments when it comes to pay. The ministry has offered workers a 5% pay rise over 2 years, but staff say that's not enough. Jared Doe, who works on the probate team at the High Court in Wellington, says they process wills from all over the country, and in the last year alone the number of files they handle has grown by 2,000.
Then you've got people on the front line who are dealing with sexual assault victims, victims of serious crimes, and those roles are some of the ones that the ministry wants to devalue. You've got people seeing harrowing stuff, typing it up every day, and they're getting told their role isn't valued anymore, so that's terrible.
Staff also want the Ministry of Justice to reduce its 15% gender pay gap, the highest of any of the core public services. In Auckland, ministry worker Avisha Prasad says she is passionate about her job, but that is not being recognised.
I want something more fair. I want less women to complain. There's about a 15% difference between men and women, and that's really unfair because all of us do the same amount of work.
That sentiment was echoed by Sarah Herbert from the High Court at Auckland.
The team members make me feel valued, but in terms of how the ministry shows us how they pay us, the workload that we have, it can be quite hard to feel valued in your job sometimes.
A Christchurch lawyer, Jeremy Daly, was supportive of today's strike action and believes many other lawyers feel the same.
It's quite poor that funds are being allocated from the government to pet projects when they should go to the people at the coalface who are working in very stressful and stressed conditions and dealing with vulnerable people who often have mental health issues, and we're not supporting them.
In a statement, the Ministry of Justice said the amount it has offered its staff is in line with other public sector pay agreements. It says it remains open and committed to reaching a negotiated settlement. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
It is, 6:18. New Zealand Rugby say their search for the next superstar of the Sevens game has attracted an overwhelming response. Tagged Ignite 7, the national body's new program, put the call out within rugby and well beyond it, searching for athletes who might one day light up a sport thriving in the wake of its first Olympic appearance. More than 500 applicants have been whittled down to just 96, with 3 males and 3 females set to earn a chance to train with the world champion New Zealand men and women's squads. Clay Wilson with more on a campaign hoping to help our high-flying National Sevens team to even greater glory.
Despite coming from a family mad about it, rugby was not one of the many sports Grace Steinmetz played growing up on the Kapiti Coast. But in the space of 10 months, the 20-year-old whose Uncle Paul played 1 test for the All Blacks has gone from rugby novice to potentially being the next big thing in New Zealand Sevens. The National Touch representative and New Zealand University's hockey player says she had no hesitation applying for Ignite 7 when it was launched in July.
I just saw it straight away and I was like, this is an awesome opportunity. You know, you've got 4 days to put your best foot forward, and at the end of it, you could be one of the lucky 3 to come out with in the development team, which means that, you know, one day you could pick up a contract and be wearing the fern.
Steinmetz is one of 48 young women, along with 48 young men, hand-picked to be put through their paces in Auckland over 4 days in November. The 96 athletes were successful among a pool of applicants of more than 500. 119 of which came from non-rugby backgrounds. New Zealand Rugby High Performance Sevens manager Tony Phillips says, in a country renowned as a world leader in rugby, Ignite 7 was about following the lead of others.
The overseas countries who don't have that structured pathway, they've picked up a lot of players from other sports, so we want to make sure that we've covered that net as well to give people those little entry points to come and play our sport.
The ability of non-rugby players to shine in Sevens has been proven by the likes of women's stars Portia Woodman and Michaela Blyde, who were discovered by a similar campaign prior to the sport's Olympic debut at Rio in 2016. Phillips says the possibilities, with applicants from snow sports to martial arts and everything in between, were exactly the same this time around.
We could see an athlete from here go to the Olympics in 2020 and also build depth and development for 2024. So if they're willing to work hard and they're coachable and they've got some X factor, who knows? Our coaches will select them.
Another one of those hoping to be selected as one of the 6 to join the national development squads is Auckland's Mark Graham. The 20-year-old represented New Zealand in age group rugby league and spent several years in the Warriors development program, but jumped at the chance presented by league's rival code.
It's not really often you see new sports introduced into the Olympics, and with Sevens being there and New Zealand's dominance in that sphere for so long, it's definitely really exciting for young athletes coming up in New Zealand, yeah.
To ultimately be successful in November though, Graham knows he'll need more than enthusiasm. Phillips says the decision makers have a clear idea of the attributes they're looking for.
You have to have a big engine to be able to work really hard, have a drive to work really hard, and then we've got to teach them the game, so they've got to be coachable. So they are the things that we really look for, and they've got to have something that's a bit different. They've got to have X factor.
Grace Steinmetz is looking forward to the chance to prove she has all those qualities. A chance, growing up in a rugby-mad family on the Kapiti Coast, she never dreamed she'd ever have.
Seeing that it's not just guys that can do it, seeing that girls, it's now professional, it's just amazing. Being able to actually, growing up, girls playing rugby, I didn't do it myself, but from a young buck, you wouldn't have thought that that could be your job one day, but now that it can, I think it's definitely a driver for lots of people. Music
to the ears of New Zealand Rugby in their quest to ensure they stay at the top in both forms of the game. Moti hotaka o tia hipo nei, ko Clay Wilson aho.
22.5 minutes past 6. 57 people remain missing at a mining community in the Philippines that bore the brunt of a massive typhoon last weekend. So far, only 16 bodies have been recovered. The ABC's Bill Birtles reports.
In the hot afternoon sun, as we make our way down a steep hill to the site of the Philippines' worst recent natural disaster, exhausted rescue workers head in the opposite direction. One by one, they clamber back up the hill after a day of digging through mud and rocks with just shovels and their bare hands. One rescuer, a police officer, says it's long, laborious work.
At the moment, we're still having a hard time retrieving the bodies. Although there are many people helping out, we don't have enough water draining into the site. Water makes it easier to retrieve bodies because it softens the mud.
At the base of the hill, up to 200 people at any one time are still digging. But as night falls, They pause their rescue efforts for another day. The urgency has gone. The local mayor of Itogon says there's a 99% chance anyone still buried is dead, and relatives waiting at the top of the hill seem to acknowledge that. Nila Poktihon is one of them.
I've been waiting here now for the past 2 days. I have a relative who was a bit further from the main landslide search site, so I'm just waiting here for the retrieval of his body.
Throughout the afternoon, another 5 bodies are brought up the hill. Relatives take turns to go and try to identify them, to see if it's a loved one. A large whiteboard details the 57 names of people still unaccounted for. Nearly all of them locals who took risks panning for gold in a mine that was supposed to have been abandoned a long time ago. This part of the Philippines has many of these mines, where seeking a fast fortune comes with real risks. In the wake of the disaster, some people, including the Philippines president, blame the illegal mining for increasing the risks of landslides. But as night falls and the search halts for another day, the focus remains on the victims. Rescuers might not pull out anyone else alive, but some say they owe it to the families to keep working to, at the very least, retrieve all the bodies.
Bill Birdle's reporting from the Philippines. New Zealand really is a country of firsts, the one we're celebrating today being the first where women won the vote. But today's MPs are still working on increasing the number of women elected to Parliament. Our political reporter Joe Moyer took a look back in time to see how things have changed.
We have campaigned, we have agitated, and we
125 years ago, women won the right to vote. Today, a group of women and one man descended on Parliament, reenacting the moment suffragists delivered a monster petition with more than 25,000 signatures. In 1933, New Zealand's first woman MP was elected to Parliament, and in 1947, Mabel Howard became the first woman cabinet minister in the Commonwealth outside of Britain. Here's Ms Howard recalling the day she found out.
Strangely, I wasn't the least bit thrilled. I was sitting up in the corner of the caucus room knitting when the final announcement was made, and I was grabbed and pushed around that room and kissed and hugged, and I think the only one in the room that didn't kiss me was Peter Fraser. But I'd never been so
Fast forward to 40 years ago, and there were 21 ministers in cabinet. The number who were women? 0. By 1998, the number of women in cabinet had risen from 0 to 2, though one of them was New Zealand's first female Prime Minister, Dame Jenny Shipley. Today, 6 of the 19 cabinet members are women, still a long way off the 50-50 split that Labour and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern are targeting. I asked one of Parliament's longest-serving MPs, National's Nick Smith, what he thinks has changed since he was first elected to Parliament 28 years ago.
There's no question the place is a lot less boozy. Pickwick was a very dynamic, busy place 28 years ago. Today you'll meet more people in the gym. If you look at the sort of the content of the food, the sort of classic male, meaty, fatty tucker that was part of Parliament then and on the Bellamy's sort of food list, that's radically changed, where the salads and the food's far more healthy. And again, I'm not saying it's the only factor that women has been part of driving that change, but there's no question that's been part of. The billiard tables got damn good use 28 years ago. They're a waste of space today. As a combination, I think actually people in Parliament today work harder, there is less socialising, but also I think there is that change characteristic from the increased number of women in the Parliament.
Mr Smith likens the old days of Parliament to an all-boys school.
It reminds me as when you go into an all-male school, there's just a smell and a feel about the place that's so blokey. And that's very much what Parliament was like. Whereas when you go into a co-ed school, you can't quite put a finger on what it is that's different, but it is radically different, and that is effectively the transition that you've seen in the New Zealand Parliament over the last 30 years.
Ruth Dyson first came to Parliament 25 years ago, but despite it being a friendlier place for women MPs with young children, the Labour MP says it's still not an attractive occupation for women.
The current Speaker, Trevor Mallard, has made a conscious effort to make Parliament more family friendly. That's going to benefit men as well as women. Women tend to be the primary caregivers though, so we're more likely to be advantaged because of those changes. But Parliament is not a very attractive place for women to come into. And I think there are huge changes that would need to be made, and I don't even know if they're possible. This is a combative place. People come here to argue because we believe in something passionately, and the opposition believes in something else as passionately. So you are likely to come into arguments pretty well all the time, although, of course, there's other times we work constructively together. But that's not attractive to women. It's not attractive to some men, but it's more attractive to men.
24-year-old Chloe Swarbrick was elected to Parliament last year. She says her youth, being a woman and being a Green MP is a triple whammy when it comes to being scrutinised.
I feel as though we still are kind of trying to wedge women into what is ultimately still quite patriarchal structures, and what I think we have the opportunity to do if we really want to reflect and look forward in an innovative way is to go, what do we do about actually recreating these structures from the ground up? What looks like, a creative, collaborative, innovative way to redesign the system so it actually works better for everybody.
Salads and exercise aside, it seems there's still a fair way to go before there will be truly equal representation in the House. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jo Moyer.
There's been an incredible amount of feedback tonight. We just don't have time to get to it, but thank you for getting in touch. Keep tuning in. We're back tomorrow. Ka kite anō.
The National Party wants to know what New Zealand First got from the Labour Party as the price of its agreement to lift the refugee quota announced this afternoon. Massey University's Vice-Chancellor Jan Thomas has been taking flak, including calls for his resignation after revelations about the reasons for cancelling a campus speech by Don Brash. The Australian government's clamping down on anyone found tampering with fruit for sale, with new laws that they could be jailed for up to 15 years. Emergency services have been dealing with a 7-car pile-up on Auckland's southwestern motorway tonight, with at least one person having to be cut from a car. Wellington's trouble-plagued new bus service is heading for an urgent independent review. And some court cases around the country were delayed today after Justice Ministry staff walked off the job for 2 hours,